Scene one, Apple, take one.
I just watched the new Sam Mendes film, Empire of Light. I don't know when I'm going to put this out or what I'm going to do with it or anything, so this might be an old movie if or when anyone ever sees the video or the interview, I guess, recording. I saw the film in the theater. My wife and I have the unlimited Regal app, so we can see, like, it's unlimited. You can see as many movies as we want. We can see the same movie over and over and over. So we go to the theater 2 or 3 times a week, every single week, and I guess I'm a purist. I want to see a film on the big screen, bigger than me, with amazing sound and all of that. And I've seen a couple of movies in a row that are all about movies. The new Spielberg film, Fabelmans, loosely autobiographical about Spielberg, who grew up in the 50s, knew he wanted to be a filmmaker and grew up to become a filmmaker. And then Empire of Light, about film theater in England in the 80s. And one of the characters learns to become a projectionist and the power of cinema and story. And then I just watched Babylon, which is about Hollywood in the 20s to the 30s as it transfers the industry from the silent era to the talkies. And I saw all 3 of these, not back to back, but in a week. But especially Empire of Light, I got out of the movie and I drove home and then sat in the car in front of my place for 30 or 40 minutes. Half thinking to myself, half talking out loud, and reminding myself of some of the stories of being in the industry and how I wanted to chronicle those, to remember them for myself. And then again, I don't know, I'll share this or maybe post it for my friends or something. And I don't talk about this much, not because I'm not happy about it or whatever, it's just like it was a job, but that, and it's funny because the Spielberg film was, I remember seeing the trailers in the summer, because of course all these movies just came out in December. The trailer for the Fabelmans, I told my wife, I'm like, that trailer is the movie of the year. It's so good. And then I saw Empire of Light and I was like, fuck. And then I saw Babylon. I was like, Babylon is over 3 hours long, and I thought it was 2 hours long. It's so good that I didn't realize. My wife called me because I was gone for so long. She's like, where are you? I'm like, I just got out of the movie. She's like, because it started at 7:30 and I got home at 11:30. But Empire of Light was the one that made me think for almost an hour about working at Deluxe in Hollywood, in LA. And I was just talking to a buddy of mine who I've interviewed for my show that I like to credit. He's the one that got me into the film industry. He's younger than me, but he graduated from high school and went to film school. And I was like, you can go to film school? I didn't know that was an option. So like 10 years after that, after I already graduated from college and like moved across the country and bought houses and done all this stuff as like an adult, I was like, fuck all that shit, I'm going to film school. But I did all that and wrote scripts with him and worked on projects with him because he was my like movie friend. And I was talking to him about it and how we have both been in the industry for 20 years. And neither one of us has had the career that at least I pictured. because of course everyone's like, I want to be a director and like make Hollywood movies and tell all my stories and do all the things, but you find a way, and it's all who you know. I just interviewed him for the Film Notes show, and he told this story about like he knew someone who got him a job, and then that person knew someone, and next thing you know, and now he's been a professional editor for like 20 years. And I knew him, who influenced me to go to film school. I went to film school overseas in Australia, and one of the teachers at the school went to UCLA, and so when I graduated, he's like, hey, went to UCLA and I have contacts there and I'm on the email list of jobs or whatever. And he's like, let me know if you need help. So I went to LA and I stayed in touch with him, and he's like, oh, hey, my old roommate from college is a manager at Deluxe and they're hiring, like you should message him and be like, I know Jonathan. And so I did, and I got the job. I worked at Deluxe for almost 10 years, and through Deluxe I worked either at, for, or with all of these film companies like Dolby and eFilm and Company 3 and Technicolor. I started off part-time, I went to full-time, and then I went to supervisor, and then I was an assistant manager, and then I was a manager, and that took about 10 years. And especially the first like 2 years, I used to joke. I was like, I get paid to watch movies and drink coffee. And I was a projectionist, only it was digital cinema. And that's one of the things that I could not stop thinking about is I came into Deluxe when, that's 2012, the transition went from film packages to basically just digital theater. And I got to work at the Hollywood Lab, which was, it's not even there. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been torn down. I think what they did is they built a new apartment building, so they tore it down because it was the adjacent lot, and then it became like a parking garage. Because if you're going to live in LA, you have to have a car, and if you have a car, you have to have a place to park it. But the lab, it's like, it's a historic building. I can't believe it was torn down. And it was like old school Hollywood Deluxe. Like, it wasn't on a studio lot, but it basically looked like you had like Deluxe security guards, and there was a gate you had to go through, and you had to show your ID, and then you went inside and you had to check in at the front desk and like show your ID again. And I would go up to the third floor, and you could go left or right, and on the left was all of these film theaters with film projectors, like reel-to-reels. They were all closed. There was like, I forget, it was a lot, like 10 or 15, maybe even 20 theaters on one side of the building. They're all closed. And on the other side, there was a kitchen and a break room. This was all union projectionists. As digital theater, digital cinema, digital projectionists, we were employees of Deluxe, so we weren't in the union. We were just worked at Deluxe. That was our job. But all the film projectionists were in the union. They're in IATSE. So I get to work with all of those guys, and a lot of those guys have been in the union for like 20, 30 years. And so they had seen, I mean, they've been working since the 80s. And they had seen the decline of film into just movies. So anyway, on the right side, there was, bathrooms and a break room, or not a break room, a kitchen and a lounge. And there were, I believe, there was 3 theaters. 1 digital theater, and then 2 film theaters. But they only used the film theater on one end and the digital theater on the other. So and we weren't allowed to go into because there was an actual projector booth. All the other theaters I worked at Deluxe, you ran everything from the desk. So you had a professional movie theater with a professional screen and professional sound and everything. And there was usually a couple rows of seats so people could sit in them and watch the movie. And sometimes they were behind you and sometimes they were in front of you. And then you had like the QC desk, which is quality control, who was the digital projectionist. And you had a computer so you could write reports and have emails and pass or fail packages and all that stuff and pull up checkers, like if you had to check subtitles or title cards or what have you. And then you had another computer which ran the loading of the digital content. So you had a player, so you could stop and start it, or you could eject a film and load another film. I mean, it's like being in a streaming platform. You know, you click on the movie you want and you play it and you fast forward it or rewind it or pause it, do whatever you want. I mean, we could do extra things, but that was basically it. Only in the lab, all the servers and everything were in the projector booth where the union projectionist was. So anyway, I got to be friends with that projectionist, and the booths are for union projectionists only. But a lot of the time I would work swing shift, which is awesome actually, because I'd work like 4 to 12 midnight. And like nobody would be there, it'd just be the two of us, because the shop steward would go home and since we do whatever we wanted. I never worked there for like, I don't know, 6 years now or something, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I used to go hang out with him, and he would change servers for me and change projectors if he needed to, or he would help me change screens. Like, I learned how to do all that. I was there for, I know I'm jumping around, but a lot of stuff is just coming to mind. I learned how to change screens, because some of the theaters, they would have different screens. You had white screens, you had silver screens, and depending on the theaters on the world, because you have to test every single format, the theaters that we had, you have to have 5.1 sound and 7.1 sound and Atmos, and you have to do closed cap and OCAP, which are for hearing and vision impaired, and you have HIVI tracks for audio, which is hearing impaired and vision impaired. You have to do, I mean, if you're doing a studio film, there's 200 versions of that movie, which sounds outrageous, but when you've got a movie that's going to every territory in the world, so it's one movie, say 20 languages. Okay, so now there's 20 versions of the movie, because it's going to be dubbed in all those languages, you know, like Chinese and Japanese and French and Spanish and German and Russian and all that stuff. But they also have the subtitled version, so you have the English language version with Russian subtitles or French subtitles or Spanish subtitles or whatever. So let's say there's 20 languages. Okay, well, so now you have 40 versions of that movie, because you have every single language dubbed and you have every single language subbed, and you have to watch every version of that package to make sure that every version of that movie is correct. And a lot of those movies also had both subbed and dubbed languages, but also a 2D version and a 3D version. So if you have 20 languages, it's 20 dubs and 20 subs, that's 40 versions times 2, that's 80 versions. Well, you then also have sometimes a 2K version and sometimes a 4K version. So now that 80 versions is 160 versions. You sometimes have the domestic cut and an international cut, or like a censor cut. So different territories might say the sex scene has to be taken out, or the fight scene is too violent, so we're going to cut certain shots out, or, you know, they don't like smoking, so they have to have some kind of insert, or it blurs something out. So there's 10 or 20 of those. Every time you have a different package, you have to play it in its entirety, make sure every single part of it works, and if any one thing is wrong, you fail it, and then somebody has to go through, fix the thing that's wrong. You know, the subs are out of sequence, or they don't line up, or the dub doesn't match. You know, the person's talking, it's the old traditional thing of like the person talks and then the dub happens after they speak or something like that. You know, it ends on picture. It's supposed to always end on black. So somebody has to fix that, and then they have to put it in the theater, and somebody has to watch it all over again. Plus you have trailers and teasers and spots and promotional material. So you have a big like tentpole movie from Fox or Disney or Sony or MGM or something like that, and you're going to spend 3 months on that. And we had 20 theaters scattered around LA running 3 shifts each. So I mean, talking QC department of 50 projectionists, but there was only the one lab, and I worked at all the facilities over 10 years, and I learned how to do all of that stuff. I learned how to swap out screens. We had the world's first Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision theater. First in Hollywood, first in LA, first in California, first in North America, first in the world. You know, Dolby's in LA, so like We gave them the biggest theater with the biggest throw. Nobody knows what throw is. I personally helped take down and then thread up a brand new screen. And it's huge. I mean, there was like 20 people doing that. Luckily, I moved up through the ranks and phased out of QCing when I did, because at the end it was very complicated and it was kind of beyond me. When it was just switch servers, play the package, watch it, pass or fail it, run through some of those things, D-box chair or what have you. It's one of those motion chairs. I could do all that stuff. But when it started being, you have to wear 3D glasses and sit in the D-box chair, and you have to do checkers for the subs, and you have to wear HIVI headphones, and you have to have like OCAP or closed cap glasses, and like, thank God I was not doing that. Quite often I would have to go sit in the theater and help the QCers because there were too many things. They couldn't check everything at once, which is great because then I got to sit in the theater and like do my job, which was drink coffee and watch movies. But those first couple years, it was amazing. Like, I watched the first Andrew Garfield Spider-Man like 50 times, and I'm just like, I'm getting paid to watch this movie like over and over and over. But the lab was the most special, and again, it doesn't exist, and that's just like, it's a hole in movie history, and like nobody knows or cares really. So the projectionist and I got to be buddies, and I would hang out with him in the booth. And of course, when you have nothing to do, you're like, I have 8 servers with 50 movies on each of them, and I'm literally gonna be like, I don't know what this is, let's watch it. I don't know what that is, let's watch it. And I was able to, for probably 3 years. I mean, there were definitely times when I was busy. When one of the Resident Evil movies came out, I remember I spent a week at the lab. It was 86 minutes. I always remember that because any movie under 90 minutes, the kind of rule was if it's under 90 minutes, it's either awful or it's amazing. There's nothing in between. If it's less than 90 minutes, that's kind of a rule. And it was kind of like awfully amazing. But anyway, so we had a big push for that, and I watched that movie all day long, every day, for a week. And it wasn't in that week, but that was the first movie I broke 50 times. 54 times I saw that movie. And I would watch it 5 or 6 times a day. Because in 6 hours, you could watch a movie 4 times. So in 8 hours, they would ask me, can you say it? Can you fit one more in? I'm like, sure. I don't mind overtime. So I'd watch it like either 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the afternoon, or like 4 and 2, or some combination of that. And I just watched it over and over and over. Oh my God. So you get to play all the games. You learn all the dialogue, and you would say it before the character, or in a scene where people are talking, you pick a character, and like the character's like talking to you because you're repeating the other person's lines back and forth just to keep yourself interested. But there was definitely times where the projectionist would just be like, what do you want to watch? Or what are we watching? And we would just put something on. But the thing that was so great is he also ran the film theater on the other side. We had a Scorsese film. They were color timing. I mean, if I had nothing to do, he'd be like, hey, come in, we're gonna watch this. And I got to sit in, and not only that, I would go in the projector booth and he would teach me how to thread reels and how to rewind reels. And of course you have to have 2 projectors because there's dual windows. And so you have one projector here, and you have to line them up. And the even reels are in one and the odd reels are in the other. And you have your primary and secondary projector, and then you run this reel, and approximately every 18 minutes there's a reel change. So if he was in the theater with me, he was constantly on a timer. So he'd be like, okay, 15 minutes, I'll be right back. And then they would give him a minute to get up and walk around and get into the projector booth. And then he would wait and look through the viewing window, which is in between the 2 projectors, because they each have a projection window. And that way he could see, and he would flip the reels. And then he would stop them and have me come in and help me, like, okay, unthread the reel, take it out, rewind it, because you have to get it set back up again. And then he would have me load, and then we'd flip reels and all that. I would just like sit in the theater, and I mean, there were some nights where you'd come in and you're like, we have 5 trailers tonight. Okay, so I did all my reports and go in, check our email, check the schedule, load everything, watch everything, fill out the reports, fail it, pass it, whatever. And like in less than an hour, you're done. And there's nothing else to do. And you're like, wow. And so I only did this one time. I got to go into the projection booth quite a bit, and I got to watch movies, like films on film a couple times. But I only went to the vault once, and it was a vault. It was like going into a bank, like the huge door with like the thing, and it's like this thick. So we walk across the other side where all the theaters are closed, and we walk through all the closed theaters. I mean, picture 20 film theaters. They're all empty. It was like being an apocalyptic film or something. Like, you have those movies where like the people are walking along and all the cars are empty and like nobody's anywhere and it's eerie. Like, that's what it was like. Because it was also at night, which is like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night or something. It's dark outside, it's dark inside, nobody's anywhere. And we just go walking through all these empty theaters, and we get to the vault, and he opens the vault up, and you open it up, and it's just in all directions, floor to ceiling, stacks of film reels. And you're watching a movie, a proper feature. I mean, it's 6 reels, and the reels are, they're this big, and they're thick, and they're heavy. So you have to have a dolly, and you stack the reels up. And he's like, oh, what are we gonna watch? I was like, what? It's like when there used to be like Blockbuster and Hollywood Videos and stuff. You walk in, and you're just like, oh, there's 10,000 movies in here. Like, what do you want to watch? Like, I don't know. It's going to take me 2 hours just to walk the lab. And I'm going to pick 50 movies I want to watch. Like, I don't know what I want to watch. And I don't remember what we watched that night, but we picked something. And there were some movies in there that were old. And like, you're like, oh my God. And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, there's millions of dollars worth of prints in here. And because he had to grab something. So he was like, well, I have to grab this. And he's like, you grab something. And so anyway, we each grabbed a movie, and he had a dolly and I had a dolly, and he's like, you can carry it, but it's going to be like 100 pounds worth of film. Like, just roll it. And this is the only time I got to load, transport, and rack out a film. So I watched Empire Light, and it takes place in the 80s in England at a film theater. And there's a old guy projectionist who's teaching this young kid like how to be a projectionist and thread the film. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, the first film project I ever worked on was in 1999. I was in a commercial in high school. I think it was in 93 or 94. It must have been 93 because it came out in the summer. And I remember people saying, oh, I saw you on TV because the commercial played like locally. And so it was the first set I was ever on in 1993. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But my buddy, MF, who I talked about earlier that I interviewed for my show, when he went to film school, he made a submission film called Submission. And I was in that, and so we spent 3 days filming that. And that was my first production that I like worked. And I was also on camera as talent. And then in the aughts, or the noughties, the early 2000s, a friend of mine and I self-taught ourselves how to make a web series. And we learned editing systems and how to film things and what have you. And then I went to film school. But so since 2010, it's 2022 right now, end of the year. It's almost Christmas. I have been in the industry, working. Either full or part-time. So I'm going on almost 15 years. And I've been writing scripts and doing all these things. And as I mentioned at the beginning of all this, I kind of forgot how, sometimes UI people, we kick ourselves. We're like, oh, I mean, I kind of did it, but I didn't really do it. I really wish I'd gone for it. And it's just reminding myself, like, I did the first YouTube Red, which I don't even think they have that anymore. But YouTube Red was like the subscription YouTube thing, and they were making exclusive content, like their own stuff. And I worked on the first YouTube Red production with some famous people. Like, I worked on a John Chu project, who he directed the Step Up movies, and he directed one of the G.I. Joe movies, and he did Gem and the Holograms, and like he's done some big movies. And like, I was on set working directly for him. Like, excuse me, sir. And he's like, call me John. Like, John, do you want this or this? He's like, do that. Like, thank you. And I worked at Deluxe, and I did all this stuff. And as I mentioned, all those companies, like, when I remember being a kid and growing up with parents who loved movies and were watching like classic, black and white movies, like Alfred Hitchcock movies and stuff from the 30s and the 50s and all that stuff. And I remember watching The Great Escape, and at the end it says Color by Deluxe, and I think Prints by Deluxe, and I remember the Deluxe logo. So when I had my teacher from Australia who went to UCLA say, my roommate works at Deluxe, and I was like, oh, Prints by Deluxe, Color by Deluxe. Deluxe has been around for over 100 years now. So it's like post-production royalty. It's the largest post-production company in the world. They over 10,000 employees in like 10 countries. It's this global thing. And so I was very excited to be like, okay, I'm like not on set, but I work in the industry. Like, every day I work in the industry. I'm helping movies get made, not by being on set, but by helping them go from post-production to distribution. Because if you don't have people to QC the movies, they can't go to theaters and nobody can watch them. And I was really proud of that. And I worked on a bunch of projects I AD'd over 200 projects. A lot were shorts and videos and commercials and things in Sydney, Australia. But I did 6 months or so of ADing in LA, and I was like, oh my God. And being on set for 12 or 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, like, I want to climb and travel, do all these things. So I'll pause for now. Tune in next time to hear part 2 of my recollections on film.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.